Welcome to the Fourth and Fourth podcast, coaching, leadership, and lessons learned from football coaches in 35 minutes. Fast-paced growth for your lift, run, or commute. I'm Donald Lawrence, and our guest today is the battling bear, Dustin Dyer, who's the tight end coach at Dickinson High School. Welcome to the podcast, Coach.
Thanks for having me, Donald. I'm excited to be here. Excited to talk a little football with some friends and, have a little conversation today, have a little fun.
Let's do it. You grew up in the Golden Triangle. What was your childhood like, and describe your high school football experience?
What was my childhood like? I had a pretty good childhood, I'd say. It's kind of a cookie cutter life. Some people would say I had the easy life. Lived in Orange, Texas my whole life, all 18 years. My dad was a plant worker, which everybody is there. Everybody's a plant worker. My mom has lived in Orange every day of her life, minus like 4 months. So she's like Miss Orange, Texas, knows everybody, gone to the same church since the day she was born, small town life. Played all sports, growing up, baseball, basketball, football, power lifted, did some other things. Really loved basketball as a kid, actually. I had quite the skill set at a young age, probably because I was bigger than everybody. But really enjoyed basketball. I kind of grew into football. But part of it is in Orange, West Orange Stark High School was there, and my uncle coached there for about 30 years. And I had the advantage of being a young child. I got to be a ball boy and was around the locker room, around football for most of my childhood, which, kind of grows you into the game. You get to see things that kids don't see, and know about. And that was cool. That was cool living in Orange. And, we lived in a neighborhood, and it was a typical neighborhood, whatever season was, we played it. There's a bunch of boys that lived in the neighborhood, lived on the street, and we played basketball during basketball season, baseball during baseball, football during football, and we were always outside, playing around and doing things kids do, sometimes that kids can't do living where we live now. It's a little more worries. My parents didn't worry if I was gone at the house for, 8-9 hours. I'd come home eventually and, they'd feed me and do all those things. But it was a great place growing up. I actually went to school at Little Cypress, Marshall, the Battling Bears, as we talked about, on the other side of town. And we weren't as successful as West Orange. I had some options from my dad because my uncle coached across town. He asked me if I wanted to go there when I was in ninth grade, and I just didn't really want to. All my friends went to school at Little Cypress, and and I don't regret any of that. But we weren't as good, but still a great football experience. Had some great coaches there. We ran the wishbone my first 3 years there, which was, difficult times. Just, you felt if you got down by 14, 20 points, like, oof, game may be over at that point. But, it was a system they'd run, had a lot of success with over the years. Then we went to more of a pro style my senior year, and I really enjoyed that. We led the district in offense. We didn't have the best win-loss record. I think we were 4-6, but we played against some good teams. Port Arthur, Thomas Jefferson, Port Arthur, Lincoln, played both of them really tight, went into overtime. But it was a fun experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I don't know if my kids will have that option, but growing up in a small town like that where you play everything year round, and everybody's into every sport, the town really backs you. You're the team of the town. It's not like all these big suburb areas where we live, where there's 12, 10 schools, in a district, and nobody is like supporting that hometown team like you see in those smaller towns, which is really cool to grow up with. Same school my parents went to, and really it was a lot of fun, really enjoyed it.
What position did you play?
My sophomore year, I played some tackle, and then my junior year I played tackle again. Then my senior year I actually played guard because we switched offenses and played guard mostly. So, and then eventually when I went to college I played center, so I've kind of played everything on the offensive line. I was always kind of a husky kid, So got to play offensive line first time. I always wanted to touch the ball. It may have been why I wanted to play basketball so much, because they let me have the ball. Because in football I was just blocking for people, which you grow to love the more you play it. Love to pull and do those kind of things linemen do, and get pancake blocks, all that. But offensive lineman for life there when I played.
Did you wear a neck roll?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely had a
I'm
neck roll.
talking about.
Had the neck
Yes,
roll,
sir.
had the visor, that was time. You got to look good, play good. That's what, Coach Prime says. Look good, play good, those
That's
type
right.
things. So had the neck roll, that was when Under Armour was coming out. So you wear the Under Armour underneath, and, you had to look good. You had to look good on the field.
So your senior year, when y'all were in the Pro I, you said, right?
Yes, correct.
Favorite play call, the one that made you light up.
Oh man, counter, no doubt, counter. When you got to pull as a guard and kick out defensive end, no matter who it was, I loved it, especially when they were just sitting there like sitting ducks or coming up the field, And we played West Orange. I remember my 10th game of the year. It was our last game. And one thing I do remember though, I pulled one time, man, and I'm going running high, and man, I've been knocking guys out all year, and obviously they'd watch the film, and man, defensive end cuts me right in the knees, his little stab technique. I was like, man, got me there. But pulling on counter, man, there was nothing like it, man. You got to wipe out a guy, and you just felt like you helped your team, and especially if you'd opened up a big play. But man, counter, I still love counter to this day. That may be part of the reason why is because I loved running it, and I always tell guys like, man, this is a great play to run. This is a kill shot, man, that you can have on these plays, and just being able to be the one that did it, so you know how it feels, when a kid or something makes a block like that. Because I used to love it. It used to really get you going in the game.
How did you get into coaching?
Well, interesting story. Like I said, I grew up coaching. I was in the field house of West Orange from, fourth, fifth grade on. I went with my uncle everywhere, rode to the games of the teams in the locker room. So I'd been around it my whole life. And when I went to college, I went to Trinity Valley and played, but then I went to Sam Houston. I decided I wanted to be a sportscaster. I was going to be the next, Chris Berman, let's say. Uh, so I went to Sam Houston State, had a great radio television program, the Dan Rather School of Broadcasting. And I went there, and man, I was like, I was going to go to ESPN. I was going to work the circuit. I was going to, be on TV. So we had a local TV station. We called it Channel 7. And man, I was on there all the time. We had a show called Bearcat Sports Report, and we won all kinds of national awards. I was on that, had all the certain shooting ties, shirts and ties, and all that. And I was going to be a sportscaster. That was what I was doing. There was no doubt in my mind. So I'll never forget. I had a couple job offers. One in Alabama, small little stations, obviously, and then one in San Angelo, Texas. So my dad, who supported me through college, he goes, "All right, I'm gonna ride out with you." So we ride to San Angelo, Texas. I forget the name of the news station. I had a friend working there from college, and so we go there and we go through the whole interview process. It was fine, and I'm thinking they're going to offer me the job the next day. And so, before I go back, they start telling me the salary, and it was significantly lower than what I could probably live on. And I was going to get like a clothing line. So my dad starts doing math, and he's calculating it up, and he's like, "Ooh, Dustin, you may have to have another job. You may have to do this." And I'm just thinking, and I know I'm now when he tells me, he goes, "I was thinking the whole time, you went to school for 4 years and you're going to make this." And obviously, I was hoping to work my way up, but just, I was like, man. So we went back to drawing board. And I always had coaching in my background because I'd been around it so much. And I think it was one of those things somebody told me I was going to do for so long. You kind of like push back on it. It's like, it's there, but I'm going to try something else first. But got ended up, smartly through my parents. My parents did me a big favor of getting me into a teaching certification program. So I went and subbed at my alma mater, Little Cypress, and would end up becoming a long-term sub. And I just really wanted to coach. I really, after seeing it be around, I was like, man, I want to be around it. I've been out of the game for a few years. And what I wanted to be a part of, and what I always say about the sportscasting, when you go to, and you're broadcasting, you are at the game, you watch the game, but you're not a part of the game. And whatever reason, I'm drawn to the win or loss, the result of a football game, and result of coaching or whatever it is, as much as affecting kids, but that drew me in and kind of got me into it. And so I got my certification, and man, I ended up, putting some applications out there. And by that August, I'd gotten my first job coaching high school football at Santa Fe High School. And man, I was pumped. I was excited. I was making more money than I would in a San Angelo TV station, believe it or not, in the teaching field. But man, I just want to be part of the result and part of the game instead of just being the person at the game telling you about it.
So you just mentioned Chris Berman. Can you say rumbling, stumbling, fumbling for us in your best Chris Berman impression?
And he was rumbling, stumbling, fumbling down the field. And I used to like that Mike also, when he used to have him and Tom Jackson Sunday Night Football. That was a must watch.
Man, that was
watch
great.
TV.
Must watch TV, man.
Good stuff back then, man. They're still good to watch when they're on.
You often post pictures and videos of your son playing sports.
Oh,
and he's
man,
young.
Yeah.
Has fatherhood impacted your coaching style or philosophy?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Man, you are a different coach when you have kids. You're your own kids. I mean, it just changes everything. For one, you look at it now, and I didn't look at athletes this way before. As man, that's you do, but it's different. That's somebody's kid you're coaching, and because I think of my son, and there is no more joy in the world than watching my kids play or perform or do whatever. I took my daughter to gymnastics tonight, and you sit there and just watch, and you just enjoy it, man. And watching my son, he plays a lot of different sports, and it's just awesome. Love watching it, and it puts in that perspective. When you're seeing these kids you work with, and everybody wants to work with the guys that are great. The guys Division I athletes, that make 4.0s. Everybody wants to work with that kid, and it's not hard to work with it, but it really puts perspective when you work with those other kids that you're around. Like, man, somebody's parent, is coming to watch that kid, or whether it be Thursday night, Friday night, powerlifting meet, track meet, whatever it is. Somebody's coming to watch that kid, and they're getting the same feeling that I get when I watch my kid. Man, it's the best part of their life, best part of their day. They're fired up. Whatever success they have, or even if they just get in a little bit, those parents are fired up to watch. And it can't help but change your perspective when you have your own kid thinking, man, and I've made it a point to try not to coach my son's teams a lot, and be a fan, and I try to put my fan, that's hard. My wife will tell you I'm terrible at it. But it's hard to put yourself in those fan shoes. And I think it puts your perspective with those kids, who aren't the stars, but their parents are coming to watch them. And it's the most important thing to them. And I think that's a big part of what changes when you have your own kids is the perspective you have, for other kids that you're watching. And watching your own kid is awesome. Doesn't matter what they do. It's just, you grow to love it.
I'm the same way. I've been asked to coach. My son plays soccer. That's the only thing I'm kind of letting him do right now because he's a little bit younger. He's 5.
Yeah.
To coach for his soccer team, and I'm not going to do it. My son is a product of COVID. Like, he was 2 when COVID hit, and all he knows is instruction from me. And I value coaching so much that I think it's very important that he learns to take instruction and organization from somebody else.
Oh, no doubt. It's hard.
100%.
It's hard to be hands off, man, because you want to teach your kids, because you know how it is. We're in this line of work, so you think you know a lot, and you probably don't know as much as you think, at least I don't. And man, and it's hard to push back and pull back. And, man, some of the toughest nights are, me and my wife sitting at a game watching our son, trying not to, trying to just contain ourselves, and don't always do it well, but try to anyway. It's hard.
Yeah, the hardest part for me is not the instruction; it's the organization. Because like being a foot, everything's in 5 minutes. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah. That's
in
football coaches, man.
Yeah, no doubt. In 2013, you coached in the state championship with the Pearland Oilers. Describe that season and tell me a little bit about that state game.
Oh, man, that was quite the year. So the funniest thing, I always say I had the biggest coaching turnaround, not personally, but just, I had been on an 0-10 team the year before I went to Pearland. That was my first year, and we went 14-2. So I always say plus 14. It's hard to beat in the coaching profession. But that was an interesting year in a lot of ways. For one, it was my first year in Pearland. So real excited about that, and you go somewhere like that, at the time, you're hoping to play in big games. You didn't know it was going to be that big a game. That was awesome. But man, that year we were pretty good. We were not in the strongest district. We didn't have a real tough schedule, so we only had one or two games on our schedule that tested us. And one of those we lost badly. We didn't play well at all. And so you're sitting there, you're thinking, we're pretty good. We'd had some injuries through the year. We had a running back get injured. Um, but we had a really good defense. We ran the ball really well, and we did some things on offense pretty good, and we got better. So we get in the playoffs. I think we played Deer Park in the first round, handled that game pretty decently, played well. And then the second game, I'll never forget this. We're playing Fort Bend Austin, and it's freezing rain. And we were better than they were, and we were up significantly in the fourth quarter. And we run a pass play, and our starting quarterback gets sacked and breaks his collarbone. So our backup, which is our coach's son, who had a he tears his ACL. Our quarterback tears his ACL. He didn't break his collarbone. Our backup quarterback, who was our coach's son, had coming off a broken collarbone just 2 weeks before. He had missed 8 weeks of the season. So we're sitting there going in, and we won the game. We had a big lead. We finished it off. And we were playing Houston Lamar next week. They had come off. They were ranked number 2 in the state. They were coming off a state championship appearance the year before with everybody back. Quarterback, they were loaded. So we're playing them. We got a backup quarterback, third round of the playoffs, and we're sitting there thinking. And I remember Coach Heath comes in, and he's talking, like you do on your game plan meetings on Sunday. He goes, well, he'd always ask, what do y'all think? What do you think? So he gets to me. He goes, oh, what do you think? I said, Coach, I don't think we're going to get first down. Their defense was one of the best I'd ever seen. I'm like, they're running cover zero with guys that are going to Texas, Baylor, wherever. They got D linemen just line go up the field. I'm like, man, how are we even going to get a first down against these guys? I was like, man, I hope we can score on defense. Hope we get like kickoff return, block a punt, something, It was just one of those things, Now that's what you say to coaches, but our kids, they had a lot of confidence, and they had a lot of confidence in our quarterback. It was our coach's son. He was coming in, and he was a different type of style of quarterback, which may have kind of helped us out in some of those games. Both our quarterbacks were real good, but I think it was just how sometimes in a game you just need a certain guy can get you over the hump. And we come out, and it was kind of a back and forth game. That game I remember, and we hit a couple big plays, a couple things we'd worked on in practice, and we kind of handled them. And I think we won like 21-12 or something. We controlled the game, and then we played South Fair in the regional final in a bitterly cold game. I mean, we're talking bitter. It was, I think, and the game lasted about an hour and a half because there was about 12 passes, it seemed like, in the game total. And we won that one 10-3. And so we go on, we play San Antonio Madison, and this is maybe one of the craziest games I've ever coached in. Going into Madison was the total opposite of Lamar. We felt, man, we're better than these guys, they were from San Antonio, so we didn't know a lot about them, and just watching them on film, it's like, I think we're better. You just don't, sometimes when you're just better than guys. And that's kind of what we thought. And so we go, and we're playing Madison, and we're down by 14 like 3 different times in the game. Like, we kind of catch up, and then they take a lead. It's like, man, it is not our day. Things weren't bouncing our way. And finally, in the third quarter, we kind of get rolling. We end up taking the lead in the fourth, and we run a play. I'll never forget it, 4th and 1. We run a little quick reverse play. Our left tackle, who's a great player, sophomore, ended up going to Air Force Academy, playing for 4 years. Great kid, great player. Like the player you want to coach, gets the worst holding penalty of all time. I think every flag and every fan, if they had a flag, were throwing it in the stands. And so we get the holding, we get 4th and 12, we don't get it. So we're thinking, oh man, that was our chance. Well, they throw like a 60-yard bomb Well, we had 12 men on the field. We had a 4-4-4 defense. You would think we'd be able to stop them, but they hit a 60-yard bomb and then score on the next play from like 20 yards out. So all of a sudden we're down. There's a minute 41 on the clock, and we're sitting there. We got 3 timeouts. We're thinking, what can we run? What can we play? And so they kick off, and we hadn't returned a kickoff or nothing all year, and all year. Our kickoff return team kept working it, hadn't returned it. So they kick it, and not only does our returner Jacoby catch it, but he's going back into the end zone to catch it. Like his back is to the field. So we're thinking, oh Lord, just get it out, take a knee, whatever. He turns and runs, and we get a killer block from a kid. Man, he takes it up the sideline. And man, to the house, like he just outruns everybody. We're going crazy, and it was crazy, that kickoff return. Man, it just brought us to the state championship game. There's no feeling, kind of like that when you're coaching. It was crazy, man, to have a play like that in a situation like that to get you to a state game is something that you wish every coach can go through, because it is awesome feeling, man. I remember we were in Waco. It was like 20 degrees, winds blowing. Everybody's excited. And just that whole week after that, man, the whole town's excited, man. They got T-shirts they're selling everywhere. They got banners they're, putting on Christmas trees, because it's Christmas time, and everybody. So we go and we're facing the Allen Eagles, who had won state the year before. They had a pretty good quarterback. You may have heard of him, a guy named Kyler Murray. He turned out to be pretty good. I think they had 5 or 6 guys on the team play in the NFL. And, man, we go play them, and man, we have a good game plan and we get the ball. We come out, boom, 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 boom. We take about 6-7 minutes off the clock. We throw a little fade ball in the corner, touchdown. Man, we took 6-7 minutes off the clock. We're up 7-0. We're thinking, man, we're here. We're ready to play. So we kick off to them, and about 40 seconds later, it's 7-7. So okay. So they get a stop. And then they drive it down to the 1-yard line. So they try a quarterback sneak, and we had a good linebacker guy named Justin Phillips, played Oklahoma State, had a time in the league. Well, he strips the ball from Kyler and goes the other way. And Justin was one of the fastest, most athletic guys we had. Well, he gets caught on like the 10-yard line, and he doesn't look right. Just something doesn't look right. And we're like, man, what's the deal? Well, we'll learn later that Justin kind of pulled his hamstring in pregame warmups. And at AT&T, the way they had it set up, it's kind of a condensed warm-up, so you don't get the full warm-up like you're used to, And he pulls his hamstring. We're like, uh-oh, Justin pulled the 10. So we end up scoring and go up 14-7. We're like, okay, well, we handle this. Well, about 30 seconds later, they score again. It's 14-all, and it just kind of, we couldn't stop them. We couldn't score enough to keep up. And man, that was the best high school team I've ever seen play. There may be some better, but with my own eyes and across the field, that was the best I had ever seen. And I think it was 35-21 at the half, and we came out in the second half, had the ball, and we threw a pick in the end zone. And after that, it was like the barn door opened, and they started scoring. We'd have a turnover. They had a kickoff return. It just kind of went downhill from there. But man, wouldn't trade the experience for anything. And the coolest thing, playing at AT&T Stadium, getting to drive down in the tunnel. I mean, playing against great players, it was awesome. And it was an awesome experience for the kids. I mean, you those are memories those kids will have the rest of their lives. Just getting to play in that stadium, play in those environments, and the journey. And that's what I remember about that season is just the journey. And it's so crazy. It was, 8-9 years ago, whatever it was, 10 years ago, I guess this year. And you remember all those moments just because they seemed so big and everything that happened. And man, it was a lot of fun. Your first year somewhere, not saying we didn't have our issues and stuff during the season, but man, it was a lot of fun. It was a great game, great time to be there. Played against great opponents, great coaches. There were great coaches we went against. And man, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Is Kyler Murray the best player you ever coached against?
He is. Now, he had a heck of a supporting cast, but he had obviously some type of it factor that was, you couldn't touch him. like we had some good defensive linemen, good defensive players, and man, you think you got him there, and he just kind of sidesteps, and man, and then he just flick his wrist and feel like he throw it 20, 30, 40 yards down the field. He was unbelievable competitor, and just unlike any I'd ever seen. I've seen some good players in our area. Houston area has great players, but he was the best I've ever seen for sure.
Who else stands out in your mind as the best you've coached against? And let's stay specific to the Houston area.
Houston area, and there's a couple early in my career. I would have to say a guy named Quandre Diggs from Angleton. We played him when I was coaching at Santa Fe, and I remember he was a freshman. Man, we had some tough kids, and we had some couple good years at Santa Fe, some good teams. I remember we were playing them, and the guys would come to the sideline. We're like, man, y'all can't tackle that guy. He's 14. He's a freshman. And they'd be like, no, coach, we're trying. We're trying. And, man, for the next 4 years, he kicked our tails. And he was unbelievable because, man, he would play offense. He would be the quarterback. He was running the ball a lot of the time. He was the best quarterback sneak guy I'd ever seen. He was a starting safety. He kick returned. He punt returned. I mean, he did everything for them. He was a stud. I mean, he played in the NFL for a reason. But he just stood out because of so many things he did. A couple other guys I can remember. Another guy we played that year in 13 at Pearland was De'Aaron King. Man, he was in our crawl for about 3 years at Manville, just making play after play. We beat him his senior year. That was a big win. I remember when I was at Pearland, but man, he was good. Just a dynamic playmaker. Making all kind of plays all over the field, could do it with his legs, his arm, all kind of plays that he made. He was just a really, really great player. But those two guys, there's been a lot of good ones. I mean, especially in the Houston area, we've played over the years at Pearland. There's been some good guys we played against. This year at Dickinson, we played against some good guys, played against North Shore, and they had some great players. But, man, those two really stand out above the rest from all the guys I've coached against.
How do you balance coaching, family time, and Dustin Dyer, the battle in bear time?
Man, that is a challenge, and it gets harder. For one thing, man, I think when you're at home, you got to leave everything else at the field house. I mean, as much as you can and be present. That's what my wife always says, be present, And it's hard because, man, your kids are juggling sports. My wife works like most guys do, a full-time job. And I just think when you leave, when you roll out of the parking lot, you're husband and dad, that's who you are. And whether it's going to games, going to practices, going to, my daughter's gymnastics, whatever it might be, you got to be all in when you're there, Like I love, the best thing I get to do, especially the second half of the year, is I get to pick my kids up from school. And man, they don't care that you coach or whatever you do. They just want, they want you to be their dad. They want to tell you about their day. Guess what I did at school? They want to show you the pictures I drew. They drew while they were at school, and I think that's important that, especially you work for somewhere, work for a staff, and I've been fortunate enough too, that you can do those things. Because you're going to have a ton of jobs and you're going to be there. And we have a saying, kind of right now, it takes what it takes, at the job I'm at Dickinson, which is true. And I think it does when you're at work. And I think you can do all the work and what you need to while you're there. But, man, once you come home, you're dad. And I think, too, you got to be there for your wife as well. Because, man, my wife, for what she does in football season, because those schedules of my kids, if your kids don't stop during football just because you're working more, those schedules are going. And, man, she takes them everywhere, gets them there, comes to our games because they want to come. So that's another big deal. So I think also you got to find time to have those date nights and do those things with your wife, just where y'all have some time to talk and decompress a little bit. I think that's important. I think it's important because it's a grind for sure, when you're coaching and doing those things. So you got to have that time. And as far as, battling bear time, which you got to have, I have to have I always say I need like an hour a day of just me, just my time, where it's really nobody else. A lot of times for me, it's I'm kind of a night owl. It's late at night. I'll be up and just I'll need a second to gather my thoughts. And I have a little longer drive to work now, so that also is the time kind of I'll put on sometimes a podcast or something, maybe something like this, in the
Hey, there
car.
you go.
Yeah, or listen to maybe re-listen to a sermon or something at my church I'd listen to. But it just gives me time to gather my thoughts on the drive. There's parts of a drive I like. I mean, the cost of gas and all that, probably not as much, but it just like I need an hour a day probably just to gather my thoughts, have some time for me. But man, that family time is important, and you can't get it back. You can't say, oh man, I'm just gonna stay a little longer. Man, there's times I think, man, you just got to go home and be with your kids and just play with them. Go play in the yard, shoot hoops. Take them to get ice cream, whatever they might want. I think you just have to do those things because man, they're only gonna be young once. They're only gonna be around you. And they want their dad around. They want their dad to be around and do those fun things with them because they're not calling you coach at home. So you need that separation a little bit from the two jobs.
Absolutely. One thing that's interesting about being in season is there's some times where I talk to my son, who's going to be 5 in 2 weeks on February 12th. And it's like I haven't talked to him in 3 months. Like he's learned so much in just a week at that
For
age,
sure.
or developed something athletically like so much in such a short period of time where I feel like I've missed months
Yeah.
since I talked to him last week. Really,
Crazy,
you know what I
isn't
mean?
it? Oh, it's crazy.
It
man.
is crazy, man. I'm
They
like, you
grow
learned
and
what?
talk.
Like,
Yeah.
how do you know that? You just talked about date nights with your wife. What marital advice would you have for coaches?
Oh man, for one, your wife probably needs to like football a little bit. Anyway, uh, it has to experience some seasons with you, before you kind of take the plunge, because it's different. It's a different lifestyle. There's really not a lot of lifestyles like this. So and you find somebody that's really committed to that, and kind of you just got to be upfront with your spouse, significant or whatever about this is a different kind of grind, and it's different depending on who your head coach and different things are. It can be different some places or where you live. And if you're at a place that is successful, the season's only longer. And that's one thing. You tell young coaches, man, you got to treat them right. Be present. So my wife likes to be present when you're home. You may have had a bad day, or the game may have not gone like you wanted to, but that you still have to be home and be dad and be a husband, and you can't take that baggage with you, which is hard. I know I've been guilty of it, because you think, man, we lost. That was a tough game. We lost. How's this affect everything? And I think you just have to communicate, like everything. You got to really communicate. You got to be aligned in each other with the same goals. This is my career goals. What are your career goals? How can we mesh these together? What sacrifices have to be made on both sides? Because I think it's a two-way street. Because my wife has a good career as well, so we both have different goals, or so you have to align those in some way, and be on the same page. Same thing with parenting, those type things. But they got to experience and love a little football. Hopefully, my wife loves football, which is great. I don't know. I think it's a little more than she ever expected, but she really loved football, so that really helps out.
On my first podcast, Coach Trahan over at Pearland Dawson, who's a friend of yours as well.
Oh yeah,
we were talking about the 2-season rule, right? So your first season, you're dating, it's all exciting and new, and then you see what she's made of the second season. Okay, so I got one more for you. One of the things that I've added to this is when I come home, I take my Apple Watch off and my phone off and put them on my nightstand until I get through dinner and the kids are bathed.
That's a great idea.
Because even if you put your phone down, your Apple Watch is still going off.
Oh,
you're still distracted. And I've figured out that for those 2 hours, let's say from 6 to 8, there's really not that much going on.
No.
It's mainly my dumb friends texting me dumb information.
Must be your Madden buddies or something,
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. What piece of advice would you give a first-year football coach?
Oh man, for one, come in and be a sponge. Everybody always says things like that. Be a willing worker. But really, I think when you come in, everybody thinks they're something, right? They're an offensive coach, they're a defensive coach, they're an offensive line coach, they're a quarterback coach, they're, whatever it is. And I think the best thing for a first year coach, especially speaking football wise, is to learn a position or coach a position that you're not really comfortable with or is on the other side of the ball. And I think it helps you learn as much as you can as far as getting better as a football coach. I think too is try to find those coaches you see and you respect, and how do they treat kids? How do they go about their daily business? How good a teacher are they? How do you become a better teacher? Because I think that's valuable. Because if you can teach in the classroom, you're probably going to be a pretty good teacher on the field. And I think it's important that you learn to do that and follow the right people. Also, know what you don't want to do is, every office has a Karen, and you don't want to get with the Karen of the office who's telling you how bad things are, how negative things can be. And you got to make sure, read the room and find the right people you can kind of follow and be a listener, the old, 2 ears, 1 mouth kind of deal. Be a listener, because everybody, when they graduate college or get into coach, thinks they know everything. Sure, no, I thought probably I did. But be a listener and learn to listen to these guys, learn to find ideas, find your niche and where you can fit in. I always say, man, go to lunch with the guys. Go to lunch and get to know guys and just sit there and listen, see what they're talking about, see how they're talking about, whatever scheme it is, and see what you can pick up just by being there, being around. And I think that's important, being in the office, and especially if you're young and if you're not married, don't have kids and those things, you can be a little more free with that, being in the office and try to, I always tell young coaches, try to be a problem fixer, not a problem maker, a problem solver, and try to fix those problems before it ever gets to your head coach. If you can become a guy like that, man,
Absolutely.
you become valuable. Hugely valuable, nip things in the bud before it ever gets to the top. I think that's important for young guys to learn, know if they can, get a handle on that. I think they can really help their careers, help themselves out.
Yeah, just trust your gut.
Yeah,
You have
yeah.
basic instincts. Right is right and wrong is wrong. I learned that quote from you.
That's right. No matter who's doing it, that's right.
That's right. What has been the most difficult struggle for you in your time coaching?
Oh man. Transitions are always tough. And I've transitioned a few times, whether to another school or from different head coaches. But one I can remember in particular in 2018, I was the offense coordinator at Pearland, and I wanted to stay at Pearland, but we had a coaching change, and it was tough. And I had to take a step down because I wanted to stay there. And that's tough. That's a tough thing to do. But the toughest part was just going through and having some philosophical differences. Also, at the same time, this was 2018, and at the same time, my daughter was being born, and it was just a difficult season, and just going through that, doing things a certain way, and just, man, I remember being just kind of angry even, and just I wasn't getting a lot of sleep. We were tired. My daughter had some breathing issues and stuff, so we were in the hospitals too, and just trying to get the transition to work. I kind of was in a kind of middleman kind of situation with some of the old staff, trying to bridge things. You're trying to be a team player. And man, I remember one day, I think you said, right, you called me, I'm like a tea kettle. I just boil till it blows over sometimes. And it just was one of those days. It just wasn't going well, man. And I just remember I had to come home and I was like, man, is this worth it? And the kicker of all this is we were undefeated that season. So it tells you it wasn't win losses. But it was a trying time, and it was just, going through transitions and things like that are just really, really tough. And I had a transition year last year, and probably kind of helped me because I had dealt with it before, so it kind of helped me the second time. But man, I just remember that season was tough. It was difficult, man. It was just tough at home, tough at work. Just wasn't having a lot of fun, and man, and in this profession, you're with the people so much that, man, you got to have a little fun for what you do on the daily. I know when you were Pearland and some of the buddies we had a lot of fun when we were coaching. And that year just wasn't a lot of fun, and not saying you have fun every day and everything you're doing, but that was big on what was going on that year. It was tough. It was tough.
Who did you during that time, that specific time in 2018, to be kind of a support system? Like I need to talk to somebody. I just need to vent. Like I'll get over it, but right now I need to let it go.
I'll tell you who it was, man. I had some great friends I still have that were on that staff still. We decided to stay. A lot of us stayed together. And man, some of those guys on that staff, are some of my best friends today. And man, we'd talk it out. We'd go, and just go out and just kind of, vent about things and talk about things. And we really were able to bond through that season even more so. And man, if it wasn't for those guys, no telling how that year had gone. Because man, they were my support. They were, but my wife and everybody, who always supports you. But having those guys, that camaraderie, that staff that year, and man, guys that are lifelong friends of mine, great friends of mine, still this day, really, I think we pushed each other through that year and made it a better situation. After that year, it was really pretty good. But that was just, man, it was a tough year for all of us, but we really bonded that year, and some great guys that kind of got me through it.
One of the things that I really took away from our time together is that you can have fun, you can laugh, you can have a blast. And if it's all through football, like everything around you gets better.
Oh, no doubt.
Because the central focus point is football, the kids, and the program.
Yeah.
I thought when I asked you this question, what's been the most difficult struggle for you in your time coaching? I thought you were going to tell our story from Arkansas. So Coach Dyer and I, it's in January, and we're in northern Arkansas, and we're going to a clinic with Coach Tony Davis, who's the defense coordinator at Bryan High School. I kind of set it up for him. I had spoke at this clinic the year before. And so we're taking Tony up there to speak. It's his first speaking engagement. We're going to stay with a guy that's about 90 years old.
Named Guy.
I think he had a landline.
Don't forget his name was Guy.
His name was Guy, and he had already fallen asleep. Well, we get out of cell service, and I'm trying to remember rural Arkansas from the year before.
It's freezing cold, don't forget.
Freezing cold. So long story short, we end up getting extremely lost. We drive into one driveway. There's a giant raccoon staring at us from the front porch.
That's the biggest raccoon I've ever seen in my life. Dude, that raccoon freaked me out to this day.
We end up backing out. We turn out. I'm like, hey, man, I think this is it. We pull into this drive, and it's not it. We end up trying to reverse out, and we get stuck. Okay? So we're stuck in this.
Tony's driving.
In this guy's front. Tony's driving. Dustin and I get out, and we're pushing. And all I hear is, put your hands up. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So our backs are to this guy coming out of the house. Me and Dustin put our hands up. Robbie, we slowly turn around, and there's a shotgun pointed right at us. And so long story short, man, Robbie told us that there's a lot of crystal meth going on in northern Arkansas, apparently. And he just so happened to have a daughter that played softball who knew the people that we were going to stay with. And he ended up getting a strap, getting his four-wheel drive, getting us out of there. And we made contact with him on Facebook. But I thought for sure that was the most difficult struggle you had in coaching, having a shotgun pointed at the back of your head.
That was a tough one. That was a tough one. I just remember Tony sitting in the car, and eventually after Robbie found his third tow rope after we broke the first two, I remember Tony never moved from the car while me and you had our white shoes were sunken in freezing cold mud. And remember old Guy washing them off over there.
Freezing cold's an understatement. Like it was cold. It's cold today. It said 39 in my truck today.
No, it was cold.
19.
There were flurries.
That's awesome, man. If someone were to describe your players Or if you were to describe your players using one word, what word would you choose?
Man, it sounds kind of boring, but consistent. Just consistent performers. Guys that do the little things well. That you want them to make the flash plays, but coaching tight ends and kind of fullback H backs that I have the last 8 or 9 years, they do a lot of dirty work that goes a little unnoticed. Just to get a ball, every once in a while. Now at Dickinson, we'll throw the ball a little more, which is exciting. But man, just guys that do the little details, can kind of be a renaissance man on the football field. Can do a little bit of blocking, a little bit of catching. Just those type of guys that can get things done are just really consistent. They may not stand out on highlight films and this and that, but man, you go and you break down the film. It's like, man, that guy's getting the job done. Most of the time. He's consistently get done. He's where he's supposed to be. And I think those are the kind of guys and kind of qualities I want in the guys I coach.
All right, man. We're down to our last question.
Uh-oh.
We're 46 minutes in. It feels like we're in minute 5.
Yeah, it's been fun. This is fun.
There's 2 minutes left.
2 minutes left.
You have no timeouts, down 5 on the 50.
Okay.
It's 4th and 4. What's your thought process, your personnel, your formation, your play?
Okay. First, we'll go formation. We're going to go, I like 11 personnel just with H-back guy and 3 receivers, First thing I'm going to do, I'm probably going to get some type of double set. But I'm going to freeze. I'm going to give a dummy call, a freeze call and shoot.
I've been waiting on that. It's 4th and 4. I've been waiting on that for 4 podcasts.
No, I'm trying to get the first down for free. I don't got to use any clock. I don't got to do anything. I'm giving it, go Hut, whatever. I'm trying to get those 5 yards. Give me the first down to get it started. But if they don't jump, I'm probably gonna, probably getting a double set. Hopefully, the quarterback's mobile or whatever. Try to throw choice route. It's kind of a choice route I've done a couple different places. Probably to your best player. That's another thing. Get the ball to your best player in that situation. Whether when a bender or choice route, whatever the defense gives you. And then in that situation. If you get a first down with 2 minutes left and you're inside the 50, you can still run the ball, in my opinion. I think you can still get a run play here or there and try to, especially if a defense gives you favorable numbers in the box and whether you run some type of 5-man blocking scheme or if you got a mobile quarterback run, and man, maybe you can steal another first down and that clock stops. And man, you get tight red zone, and I just think you got, you get the ball to your best players in those situations. I probably keep it pretty spread out, trips, doubles, those type things. Maybe if you need a 6-man protection because they just have great defenders, you keep your H back in or whatever you might do. But I still think you can run the ball. I think if you do get a first down, some type of screen or something in that situation isn't bad as well if you're not as comfortable running it. And then, man, when you get in that tight red zone situation, I think you got to have about 3 or 4 plays or pass routes that you practiced all the time, all year long in those situations. And, man, you try to find one, use all of them if you got to and try to hit on those, whatever beats man. So if you have some man beers or zone, whatever zone coverages you want to run, and you run those and plays you've practiced and repped a bunch of times in practice in that situation is going to win you the game. But try to freeze them first and get that first 5 yards.
Coach Dyer, we're coming on 50 minutes now. That's the perfect amount of time to play for your classes on Friday and give them a real education. Tell the listeners how to find you on social media.
Okay. Yeah, you can find me. I'm on Facebook, Dustin Dyer. I'm also on Twitter at @DDyer_77. And I'm also on Instagram at Dustin Dyer 77. You can find me. Usually it's, like you said, highlights of my son or daughter doing something cool, but that's how you can find me on social media.
Was that your pulling guard number, 77?
77. That was the pulling guard with the neck roll. You got the
with the neck roll.
With the neck roll.
That's what I'm talking about. Thanks again, Coach. You can find me on Twitter at Coach Lawrence FB, as in search 4th and 4 Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Podcast, and YouTube. Keep grinding.